Welcome to episode 313 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deacon, and have we got a really great episode for you, especially if you grow wheat. Today on the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast, we're talking with Oklahoma State University Extension Small Grain Specialist, Dr. Amanda Silva. Before we do that, go ahead and bump that subscribe button where you get your podcast. And remember, you can find all of the information that we talk about on this episode and past episodes as well on our website, reddirtagronomy.com, including a link to find out what the highest performing wheat variety was in 2024. As always, we start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
There's not too many crops our breeders focus on how to grow it in crappy ground. I mean, seriously, our corn is produced in the best ground. We're growing it in the high organic matter, unlimited. And in wheat, because of the marginal lands, we're doing things, we're breeding for, okay, how do we grow under aluminum tolerance? How do we grow under nitrogen deficiency?
Dr. Brian Arnall. And across from him is Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
Okay, if you haven't greased up your combine, if you haven't got it out to make sure there's no possums kind of sitting in the bin, like that, now's your time that you need to, go possum check.
Dr. Josh Lofton. We'll just cut to the chase and dive into our chat about the 2024 wheat crop. Incidentally, this was the final episode of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast, recorded in the old Ag Hall. It's now technically Legacy Hall because all of the offices have been moved to the new Ag Hall. It's a beautiful building. If you get a chance, you need to check it out next time you're on the Oklahoma State University campus. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
Well, it's, we're recording this mid-July. I'm swimming in wheat data trying to figure out what happened, even though harvest was a month ago. People yelling at me that they want more results faster. I'm like, the labs only move so fast. But, we had a pretty fascinating wheat harvest. I'm trying to channel my Jason Warren here. A fascinating wheat harvest in that there was some amazing yields in regions that aren't historically high, and we had some poor areas. So as we start talking about the 2023-2024 wheat crop, of course, we have the one and only Dr. Amanda Silva here, our small grains extension specialist. And we really just kind of want to go through what have you seen. First, talk about what you had out in that, last year crop-wise, not just the variety trials, but some of the other work you're doing. What did you have and what are you looking at right now?
In this past season, I think we had maybe 40 experiments going on. So that includes the variety trials, testing, intensive management, standard management, grain only, dual purpose. And then on the research plot is where we are focusing a lot on trying to understand the physiology of wheat under late planting conditions, and also on best management practices for late planting conditions. So we are looking at trials where we have on-farm studies, one at Apache, one at Kildare, looking at planting date, different varieties with not only different, but differing in maturity, in seeding rate also. So another studies that we are also looking at nutrient, especially nitrogen, uptake in wheat, really trying to understand the dynamics of high and low protein genotypes. So one we are wrapping up now with Brian for one of my master's students who's just defended last week. So really trying to understand how plants with high and low protein use nitrogen. And that study actually is starting, kind of opening a can of worms on the research that we are doing. So we are like taking different approaches to really try to understand that. So best management practices for late planted wheat, and also nitrogen uptake dynamics of wheat varieties that are high in protein, especially.
So I think Josh and I are both pretty excited about, at least agronomically, the opportunities with this late plant, early harvest, whatever you want to say, as far as the cropping systems, crop rotations. What are some of your take homes so far from this last year?
From last year or from the results?
The results,
maybe.
Yeah.
So from one of these studies, we had 6 site years. So that is from my other previous master's student, so Israel. Actually, if from what we are seeing right now, as far as grain yield, if a farmer has seed that he already bought in August, for some reason he could not get on the ground and he's planting, let's say in November, he's planting later. From what we have seen is that he's not going to lose any yield by delaying planting, not every year.
Yeah.
So depending on the conditions. Also depending on the conditions, I think especially that is that he doesn't need to increase seeding rate.
So that's an interesting thing because
is it that whole once you go to November you're up to 2 bushels kind of thing?
Even in
that's
my
what you're
head,
saying we don't need to.
So for that is one study, 6 site years. So I would say varieties, we are still looking into that, but that's what we found. Right now we have not found any differences in yield with the varieties we tested. And with 2 seeding rates, one was about maybe 870 seeds per acre. The other one 1.4 million seeds per acre. No difference. So bumping the seed to almost 1.5 million seeds. So no difference in yield.
The crazy thing I've seen from my time here, at least what I've been doing, if I look back in the early 2000s, not planting 90 pounds, 80 pounds, almost any time of the year, going down to below 80 pounds, even in September was crazy that you wouldn't do that. I became very comfortable with planting 66 pounds through October. But I would have still said, okay, if I'm at November 15th, I'd probably need 120 pounds. So what's going on physiologically? Is it a variety? Varieties have improved? Is it the management to get that seed out of the ground improved? Because I can also see maybe it's that we're getting better seed soil contact, we're getting more plants up, more survive.
Yeah,
I
think it's a combination of that, of our best management practices at sowing, especially knowing that when we go and plant late, that maybe we are making sure we get that good seed to soil contact. Maybe conditions at that point were better at sowing than in October. So then that month, let's say if you delay from October to November, that will not make a very big difference if October was the entire month really dry. So there is the environment effect there. Maybe with that phosphorus application, make sure we get that. Make sure maybe we get a seed treatment later in the season. But I also do believe that we have to really keep our eyes open when we look at recommendations that were developed for older varieties. Because we see that there is improvement when we look at varieties that we used to plant and we compare with varieties that we plant now. Just the genetics is different and we see improvement. So maybe some varieties that we've been selecting, especially in this environment, they are more resilient and they can adapt better to the environment today.
So going back to, hold on, but it's going back to that same thing. Yeah. So the genetics versus our practices. So if a grower's using these new genetics, but is still planting with an old shank planter, are you still pretty comfortable with not increasing our seeding rate when we go a little bit later? So let's say we're not using an air seeder that has really nice singulation with all the new, but we're using the old box drill with a shank. Are we still comfortable there, or is that the time that we need to think about pumping that seeding rate up? I think
all of our trials, you're not planting with air seeder. No. So that's where the results came from. I would still be cautious on not doing anything with seeding rate, but it's just like the first study that we had actually comparing those two extremes. I would say extreme in seeding rate. I would expect to see something in there. We are not really seeing it. And those were 9 varieties that we were comparing, and none of them had a response to the seeding rate.
How much is seed treatment playing into this? Does seed treatment, in your opinion, is seed treatment in October more or less important than seed treatment in November?
In my mind, never tested.
Yeah.
I think it would be more important later, where they are going to be sitting there for longer in colder soils, take a little bit longer to emerge. We had plots that we planted in December that we didn't see it until, I don't know, February. Of course, the seed treatment is not going to work all that long, but it's much better have some than nothing at that point.
See, that's kind of what I was thinking. Is that there's an improvement and more utilization of seed treatment. Seed treatment is much more common now. That would also play into the amount of seed you need in that ground to end up with so many viable plants and seed heads.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, going back, and you brought a great guest speaker in talking about tiller management, and it really started Brian on this venture down how many tillers we need to maintain. Were we just okay in the past sloughing tillers off and getting a lot of tillers in the fall, and now we're starting to realize that, hey, we can do without this.
We can manage.
We can manage. We can instead of managing our plant population, we can manage things like fertility or IPM or planting that better suits to where we're not spending that money up front.
And that's one of the things that we are trying to do now. So Brian and I, we have one study where we are going to be looking at. We planted last season, different seeding rate, different nitrogen rate, and timing. So how can we really manage for that tiller, and what is the effect on final yield? So does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd say even the expectation and desire of the wheat producer has changed slightly over time. If you think about it, what a farmer or what a wheat producer would want to look at the first part of February as far as their expected amount of biomass out there, complete row coverage, near boot top high, and there's a lot more of acceptance, and it's okay to have still have row showing in February. And
a thinner crop.
A thinner crop, less biomass. And I mean, if you look at our weather patterns don't suggest that we need a lot of biomass going into the spring when we could be very dry.
It's actually the opposite. We are doing a lot of competition among those tillers if we do that, if we promote too much. So in general, that's what we see. Of course, we are talking in a different scenario here. We are not talking about dual purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
Grain only kind of situation.
And so what we are doing there by promoting that lush canopy and a lot of tillers in the fall more than we need, then we're just increasing the competition among them.
So I guess I come to the question because, that all makes sense. We don't want to utilize resources kind of in the fall. I think you had a graduate student that I asked him during the thing is almost that early fall growth, almost wasted growth, because you aren't carrying those resources over as efficiently as then if you have that kind of growth in February. I mean, somebody that's been here for a while, has our Februaries and March changed? Or again, is this just a different way of thinking on what we're kind of going about?
I don't know if our February's and March change. We've gone through cycles. So what I would say is we go through these 4 to 6 year time frames. Dave, I'm looking at Dave too, because we pocket in where we'll have 4 or 5 years where February is just beautiful. We warm up early. We've gone through a long period where I'd say we've stayed cooler longer. Some of those have been very dry, January, February. Some have had more moisture. We've not had a good warm-up spring that I could think of. And I relate this back more to Bermuda grass, because Bermuda grass is my telltale to have we had this spring that gets stuff up and going. We had pockets last year in our southwest of our wheat crop that really got up and running. But even up north here, we still kind of faltered a little bit on a later spring. So maybe cooler spring but that shouldn't really change this, because it's just saying it actually holds less growth when you would expect to see more growth, and we're not losing yield right now because we're not growing in the spring when you would expect. Well, I'm not getting that lush growth in February, so I'm losing wheat yield, but our yields when we're managing, our yields are going up. My yield potentials have not gone down in the last 10 years of what I expect out of my fields.
Well, not only that, but it's like, almost have we shifted that our major snowfall and ice isn't coming in December and January, but more January and February, or even February and March now?
So historically, December is the driest month of the year, and January is one of the second driest. December and January tends to be our driest in the state. if you look historically, we do have the summer lull, but those are not a high rainfall, which makes some of the late sowing get a little tricky. Is because November we tend to have good snowfall, but we haven't had that. And so there's been a lot of years where finding moisture at Thanksgiving is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue.
And so that the late sowing, but that also means if I still can't, to me it's intriguing on the late sowing, and we can also get into the early harvest, but man, how's that open up our crop rotation if I'm not worried or I'm not rushed to get whatever's out of the field by October 10th so I can be sowing, but I'm okay for a dry down period till November 1st or November 5th and still be comfortable with the seeding rate that I was planning on and the varieties I'm choosing to plant that early November.
Well, not only that, because we did, we've done some work on soybean seed quality and how much yield we lose leaving it in the field, only because in Louisiana, I did the same thing, and it was because of hurricanes or field moisture. In Oklahoma, that matters because it's almost, when I got here, October was for wheat planting. It didn't matter if your soybeans were ready to harvest. It's wheat planting weather. But if you can do that and you can punt till, Halloween or later on just normally planting wheat, God, that even if it doesn't free up your rotation, it makes it to where you can be you can harvest your soybeans on time, and then you can move into your wheat and not worry that I'm limiting yield or having to spend more money by buying more bags of seed.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point, and something that I like to clarify, because the idea of this study, like of the late planting wheat, I wouldn't recommend farmers to change their practice and start planting late, because there is a penalty on the yield when we see. In some years, we don't see that penalty because the conditions in early fall are so terrible, so dry, then by delaying, they actually see an yield gain from that. But overall, like if they don't have any rotation to deal with, I would stick with the plan.
You'd still
be in the October.
It's when your conditions are good. Then,
yeah. But then another thing is, like what I mentioned, as far as varieties, so they don't have to worry about changing varieties. They can plant, as far as what our data is showing, is that they can plant any, at least from the little bit that we tried. So from those 9 varieties, they could plant any of those that they would get very similar yields. However, if at harvest, the harvest date for them matters, then that's a different story. So that's when the short season has the very important role in that case. So if for them removing the wheat earlier at harvest, then they need to select a short season type of wheat. So as far as yield, for now, no difference, but as far as maturity pattern and time of harvest, that matters for variety selection.
Just on the periphery is where I hear a lot of these things, but I asked Carver last time we were here, and I want to ask you, is I hear a lot of folks talking about last freeze date now. Like that's become such a major issue of like, I'm having to change my planting rate or my planting date, not for the conditions in the fall, but I don't want, if I'm not grazing, I don't want to plant the 1st of October, because if it comes out of dormancy too early and it has so much growth to it, I'm getting burned by those late season freezes.
Oh, yes.
And so we talked a little bit about these short season varieties on how that would impact, or how even management, we, look at those later freezes that seem to just always plague us. Weather can change quite a bit, but you almost always guarantee a freeze in April. It's the only thing about Oklahoma weather I think you can pitch, is that July is going to be dry and April is going to have a freeze. So like, how would you recommend, or how have you seen growers kind of get over that hump on those later freezes?
I think, that is one of the reasons why in a lot of cases I don't like planting too early in October. So we have so many trials to plant, but I am most comfortable late October, because planting normal varieties earlier, if you're not in a dual purpose system, I think it really, really increases your risks of getting hit by the freeze in April. As far as the short season, it's I would not recommend that for October planting because the chances that you're going to get caught by the freeze is just very high. So if you're planning to plant a short season, you have to plant late. So that is, if you bought that seed, I think that is the plan. So November, December planting.
But have you seen anything with our seeding rates? Again, going back to seeding rates, is that mattering at all in that April transition, or does that have a lot just to do with the planting dates? Like, if we go to that traditional 2 bushels in November, are we doing ourselves a better service by going down to 1.5 bushels or even just still at 1 bushel in November, or is that not mattering at all?
So the seeding rate, a late stage, I think, let's say in this case that we are not seeing an impact on yield, I think that could be like helping with stand in case something is to happen in the season that we lose some stand. Maybe that would help some with that. With canopy coverage, so faster. As far as yield, I'm not seeing any translation to that yet. So,
and I don't know if I've ever seen seeding rate translate into maturity differences. Like, there's a lot of things I can do that influences maturity, and I don't necessarily think I've seen it happen on seeding rate.
Oh, I see. I guess I didn't understand. That was the question.
Yeah, the one thing I'm going on is if you are removing that tiller production and just putting more seeds out there, I didn't know if physiologically or phenology wise, if you go to February where we want to go, coming out of dormancy and wanting to put on more tillers, but I planted at such a high seeding rate, does that discourage that tiller production? I would assume
you would
and so
promote more main tillers. That's what you would. That's why we do that, let's say, in an intensive management scenario. You see that we have in the variety trials, that's the goal. You put more seeds to promote more of those bigger heads, main tillers, and then less smaller tillers. And in that scenario, you have the fertility, you have the fungicide to help maintain those. That's kind of what we do. That's why we do that.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, because it's, as somebody that works mainly on summer crops, I would prefer the wheat to mature out faster. But in Oklahoma, we're kind of almost in a box because we can't have it mature too fast because we always got April freeze. But I want to get out as soon as I can and to let more July open up. That way, if we have bad conditions the 1st July, I can wait for rain. But if we're not harvesting until the 4th of June. If I'm not harvesting until the 4th of July, I'm kind of stuck. And so it is one of those things, as a person that is working on the cropping systems in the summer part of this, it's like anything I can do we want to make sure that it doesn't die in April, but as soon as May 4th hits, I'd love it to be out the ground. So I'd have all this time to use environmental conditions to my favor.
Yeah, and that's why I guess if you ask Carver, he'll tell you it's so tricky breeding for it. Because one of the main things that you have to deal with breeding a short season, for example, is that critical period. So that period that sometimes we think that the length of the season is more associated with what the wheat's going to produce. So there is some research showing that that's not true. The most important period for wheat is that critical period. So the period from, let's say, first hollow stem to heading. And so as manipulating that is where our yield is mostly coming from. So if we shorten that too much, you're going to have a penalty.
That's a yield issue.
Yeah. So the short season is not just reducing everything. You have to be careful how much you reduce in the season. But it's not only about reducing. The way I see is you keep that critical period, you reduce the grain filling in a way that variety is more efficient in utilizing the resources. And one way to look into that is when you see that short season variety you see its test weight under heat, it keeps it very high. So it's finishing fast, but it's not really stressing. It's not because of stress. Because you'll see some varieties, it gets really hot and harvest is like ready in a day. But that variety, you see like it's taking its time and it's finishing fast just because it's finishing fast. So it's very efficient utilizing resources during grain filling. So that's kind of how we kind of need to develop those. Now we have to ask the breeders too. to develop more of those.
Well, so we talked about that critical period. I know you wanted to talk about hollow stem.
Nope. Well, yeah. So, and this I guess goes a little bit back to having Brett on a little while ago. We talked about it. So, I look at it. If I look at my plots, which I'll be planting near Amanda in a lot of my locations, but I might plant later than she does or around that same time. October, I don't start until October 15th, and I'll run through November 15th. I delay nitrogen on all my stuff that gets no nitrogen, even bulk ground, until maybe January, February, probably. So I've got late sown. I've got nitrogen deficiency almost always. My hollow stem date is always far from anything that's ever predicted with the OSU models.
From Mesonet or
from the Mesonet? Yeah, the Mesonet hollow stem.
Mesonet.
Yeah, and all that stuff. And I take it to management. So Brett was talking about he feels like we're seeing maybe some missed opportunity on some of the ways that we're looking at hollow stem. And we got in a little bit of that conversation before we started recording. So what are you seeing, and as you look at hollow stem and trying to manage that as a dual purpose system, how does a producer refine that and get the most out of that wheat crop?
Okay, let me see if I understand. So you're asking, let's say, for example, how we measure first hollow stem in the program, and we give that information to farmers. How can they use that actually? Because that's going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good average, right? It's what Extension does is we release an average and hope that the people go out and do something more precise.
Mm-hmm. The way they need to look into the data we provide that we measure by hand. So we just go there, collect samples, and measure with a little ruler. And we give the centimeters or the distance of or the size of the first hollow stem. They need to be looking into that, and I even write that in the report. It's basically in a relative scale. So how they need to use that. It's not because I said, well, this variety reached first hollow stem, it reached in their fields. It's not going to be the same. Like you said, sometimes we plant side by side in the same environment, but we had different varieties, different planting dates, different management practices, and we have totally different, I don't know if totally, but different first hollow stem dates. So the way they need to look into that is, if I'm saying the variety X reached first hollow stem today, and then we have another variety, a B variety, that reached first hollow stem 10 days after. So they know in that list of varieties which ones tend to be earlier and which ones tend to be late. In the middle is really hard to define. It can change a little bit, especially if you look at our data in Chickasha and Stillwater, you don't get the same rankings. So the environment has a very strong effect on the first hollow stem date. So that's why it's important for them to measure a few of them on their field. So the more they know what their environment is like, or what is the effect of their management on first hollow stem, maybe even in comparison with ours. So that could help them to make that decision.
So let me ask you this. You said something that was pretty key to me, that Chickasha and Stillwater may rank out differently in the same year. What about across years? Do the varieties at Chickasha tend to stay early at Chickasha and differ in Stillwater, or is it... Because we're talking right now spatial variability. What about temporal? Is there a consistency at Chickasha that presents itself in a consistency at Stillwater, or is it just almost random year by year?
I think it depends. I think there is
Good
some
answer.
I think it depends, because I'm trying to remember on my tables, as I look. There is a tendency that some varieties that are early, it's early everywhere, and it's early every year. But I think it depends how some of those varieties will handle stress. I think that has to do with its development. Maybe some varieties that will handle a little bit better, or if you have a very good conditions for growth, then the results may be something. And then if you have very stressful conditions, some will do better than others, and that could could change its rankings. But overall, I think there is some consistency especially on the extremes. Some varieties that I can just think that this is really early. In general, are the ones that we go first and check. Like instead of checking the 50 plots we have, we go on those that we know that are usually early.
I think this is a really good point, because we have 3 state specialists in the room right now, is to recognize that what we put out at OSU is averages. We're sharing trends, we're sharing things like that, with the understanding some people will take that and just run with it, but with the hopes that that trend of maturity, hollow stem, triggers the farmers and producers to go to each field and scout. So there's nothing more valuable than time in the field, looking at your own field that is managed in your own way with your own cattle or genetics and farming practices, and that importance of in situ or by site data to make the decisions. And we're just providing kind of axillary or around the general terms.
Exactly. Very good put. And and there's some questions about me testing our first hollow stem. So usually we test in non-grazed plots. So you drive by our demos here, it's especially last year, that very big lush canopy, so way well developed crop ahead of everything else. So people that are grazing, the wheat's much growing much slower than ours. And we kind of do that on purpose, especially because we want it to be an alert tool for farmers. So this is where we are. This is what the wheat's doing. And so you have some time to make the decision to go and check it out. There is also this thought, but we haven't tested exactly, but maybe a theory, and even Dr. Carver can comment on that because it is one of his theories, that when we graze, we may compress the difference between varieties. And that is true. We could be doing that. But like I said, I want farmers to use this data in a relative scale, and whatever is early, it should be one of the first for them to monitor in their fields, and then whatever is later, so maybe they have even a little more time to remove the cattle. But checking their own fields is the best they can do.
If you were to, as a person that doesn't check hollow stem a lot, as an ever, how much difference do you typically would expect between let's just say a moderate grazed versus a non-grazed? Like, are we talking about 2 weeks difference
in reaching
first hollow stem?
I guess it could be 2 weeks.
I'd say a solid 10 days.
Yeah.
I can create 10 days of difference with fertility.
Because based on my understanding, when, Jeff Edwards used to talk about it, and we, go to Lahoma Field Day, and we talk about it all the time, it wasn't, it's time to pull off your cattle. It was, it's time to start making that plan.
Yeah.
To check, yes.
Well, not even to check. You need to make sure you know where your cattle are going. You need to make sure your trailers are ready to go, It's kind of like when we do harvest at the end of the season. It's once we reach black layer, it isn't let's start. We're in the field. It's okay. If you haven't greased up your combine, if you haven't got it out to make sure there's no possums kind of sitting in the bin, like that, now's your time that you need to go possum check. So,
you're on fire.
You're turning into like David Payne during severe weather coverage. I mean, get your granny out of the home or something. But now you're checking possums and combines.
Get granny out of bingo.
Yeah, that's what it was. Out of bingo. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just always a guide. It's even the mesonet. It's not a. It's that, hey, yeah, we have had the conditions that this is going to be early. So you normally don't check until January 30. January 15, you might want to start checking.
For sure, yeah. And we've seen, like, when you look at the mesonet, especially on dry years, you can see the suggestions there being a little bit kind of not as accurate as one would expect in a normal condition. So when we look into those things, we kind of have to keep in mind everything else that we are actually seeing. So those tools were developed for some conditions. For example, in those past 2 years with a very dry environment, they were not as even matching with our updates, so sometimes. And that's fine, but we just need to know, I guess, and I try to highlight and I try to explain that But keeping that in mind is just as a guideline so this is the time of the season where we should be or checking or preparing to check for first hollow stem.
I've seen a big push since you've got here, and you over the last couple of years have really started pushing that protein, with nitrogen, protein. When we take a look at our different systems, like our dual purpose versus our grain only, and a lot of these management considerations, how much different is it for a potential dual purpose grower versus a grain only grower? Some of these recommendations, like how much impact do the cattle have potentially on that end of season protein when they are actively on? Since they are before that critical period, do they have any impact at all? Or are these, the big thing I'm asking is I guess, are these recommendations translated 100% between grain only and grazed, or is there some nuance that you have to watch out for?
I mean, there's nuance. So the grazing of cattle will not, in what I've seen, change final protein. The management of the system, because you have cattle, has more of an impact. And so, as you mentioned, I've been big on the protein. For me, it's not necessarily about getting the protein. It's not about a protein premium. But for me, as a fertility specialist, increasing protein in the grain means you have the proper amount of nitrogen available at the end of season to put nitrogen into the grain, and you didn't run out or have it too early. So that protein for me has allowed to show that I can have the same amount of nitrogen going down, but if I shift the timing, I get more of it out of the field. And it's that movement. So I've used protein more as a guide on nutrient management strategies. But the cattle side, dual purpose, you just got to make sure you got your forage production nitrogen down. Delay it, and then get it that later season so that when that plant's going through reproductive stages, it's assimilating carbohydrates, it's moving nitrogen from leaf into the grain or wherever it's coming from, that it's there. And because it's a source sink issue, and on both, depending on what you're talking about, carbohydrates, which is basically berry size, right, Amanda, and the protein, which is nitrogen. So on the protein side, it's a source sink issue, and it's not, is it sink limited? It's source limited, meaning if we run out, then we see low protein.
Yeah, and sometimes what we see when we compare those systems, you may see a higher protein in the dual purpose than in a grain only, and that could often be because of a consequence of what happened with yield. So higher yield, you have lower protein, and then, like Brian just said about the nitrogen, you ran out of nitrogen, so you didn't have enough to support that. To increase both yield and protein. And so basically when you see a reduction or when you see an increase in protein sometimes in dual purpose, it could be because that variety also had lower yield.
I want to go back to kind of what you were talking with Carver before last time that you guys never got to. And you and Amanda can kind of talk about it, is, the continual importance, and I think growers see it, is on pH sensitivity on our wheat varieties and how that's progressing as we're going, not only on knowledge of it, but management of it. So you guys battle royale at it.
It won't be battle. So Amanda, to give you background, instead of throwing you in and saying, "Hey, how about it?"
Throwing in, checking for possums.
So
I can't wait to see the Mesonet possum combine detector.
We should
recommendation dates. I need to go with Wes about that.
The conversation started with Brett, and we really should have recorded. We'll bring it back on because I like to tease him about being such a good breeder. He's caused more problems, but I've said it out loud before. So in the Pacific Northwest and throughout Canada, we're seeing soil acidity becoming an issue in the grains, and so there's been a lot of questions about breeding aluminum tolerance and that kind of stuff. And so I'm working on a little write up and working with some folks up there. It's like, we need to be cautious that aluminum tolerance isn't our only mechanism on soil acidity, because at least in Oklahoma and in Kansas, we relied so heavily upon aluminum tolerant varieties and banding phosphorus that we actually forgot the pH was still going down. And it created problems. And he agreed with me is that, it sometimes our short-term solutions, our Band-Aids, which is aluminum tolerance, which is banding phosphorus, become a solution, especially in the lower value or the areas of land that have lower margins. So if I'm leasing a ground, why would I lime? So then I use aluminum tolerant, and that ground keeps getting leased. Now, we started with the problem pH of 5.4, and then you send it to OSU, and it's 3.7.
Wow.
And it's common. I've seen a lot of high threes, and it's because of this. So I guess it goes back to, I don't know what the question was, Josh, or how we got in the conversation, but is it that we should be breeding for these things? Was that the question we got into? Or what did you want to hear me and Amanda go after?
Well, I mean, just I always think that the interesting back and forth on aluminum versus pH is really interesting. And going back to one of your former graduate students that looked at the genetic component of aluminum tolerance and that. So, Marburgers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Wheat specialist. You're all the same.
Yeah. You're all the same.
You're all the same.
You look identical too.
Right?
You and Dave Marburger. Spitting image. It's just that so much work kind of has seemingly been placed on that. It's just an interesting to get perspective on that genetic component that you don't hear a lot. I mean, you go to soybean, especially around here, you talk about includer and excluder soybeans, but I don't know if we talk as much about soil pH on those. So I just kind of wanted you to bring what you were talking about before to light.
Well, there's not too many crops our breeders focus on how to grow it in crappy ground.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, our corn is produced in the best ground. I mean, we're growing it in the high organic matter, unlimited. And in wheat, because of the marginal lands, we're doing things, we're breeding for, okay, how do we grow under aluminum tolerance? How do we grow under nitrogen deficiency? I mean, the NUE wheats that we look at wasn't because we wanted higher efficiency, it's because we assumed we've got some lands that could be fertilized better, but they're not being. I mean, how many irrigated corn farmers can you go to and say you're not putting enough nitrogen down?
Not many.
But we can go to a couple wheat fields, and it doesn't take us long to go find cowpox to find out that there's probably a nitrogen deficiency out there. And so that's an interesting thing about wheat is that we have bred for the bad. And I think in some cases it's allowed us to get worse on our land. So now we start talking about we have increased aluminum, we have continuously decreasing pH. We have, with a decrease in pH, we have limited availability of nutrients. We have rooting issues. We have a change in the microfauna of the soil when you're changing from a neutral to an acidic soil. And we have an impact on herbicides.
Well, and I think it's interesting that even from a scientist basis, like you go to our national meeting and you go in and talk about or listen to people from all over the world. It's not a U.S. issue. It's not a Great Plains issue. It's a worldwide. There's a leaning into that wheat that we're okay to go on worse ground. And so we lean into that a little bit. And it's kind of an interesting concept of we kind of almost have taken advantage of it being such a tough crop. And we need to maybe get out of that advantage to where we're treating it more like a little princess, even though it doesn't need to, but we need to treat it like it's a corn crop grown in, well, maybe not grown in the Midwest because then you just throw seed out and then but you need to treat it like a crop that needs those inputs, and we'll really see the advantage of that in the long term. And I think you see a lot of that. It even translates to the other crops because where we've seen where we have to just struggle through residue at planting always seem to be our best crops on our summer crops too, where it's just been able to produce so much biomass is just been a better crop as well. So like you treat your wheat better, your soybean or your sorghum or your corn on the back end does better as well.
Just thinking on what you're saying, Brian, very, very interesting. Basically saying that we overused the technology and now we are kind of seeing problems like the resistance to acid soils.
Yeah. I mean, I could see it as being very similar to glyphosate resistant.
Yeah. And, but in those cases, like sometimes I always like to think and I think we talked about this in Abiola's defense. Mm-hmm. When breeders select for, let's say, he was focusing on selecting for aluminum tolerance, what else did he do indirectly and unintentionally that maybe selected for other traits in that variety made it not only aluminum tolerance, but is it better in tolerance to other stresses as well? So like in the NUE study that they're doing down at Tipton, that they have a very low, medium, and a high nitrogen. So when he's selecting for his experimental lines in very low nitrogen, he's selecting for yield visually. He's selecting, or visually, no, with data, visually selecting for other traits. But there are some traits that you can really see, for example, the below ground, the roots. Unintentionally, maybe selecting for varieties that are better in using nitrogen in those conditions. So I don't know, when you're talking about the aluminum tolerance, I was just thinking about that. What else maybe?
We did it before either of you showed up here, working with Chad Penn, who was a soil chemist long ago. We were looking at genetic or genotypes, aluminum tolerant genotypes and non-aluminum tolerant, and their phosphorus use efficiencies. And while not all aluminum tolerant varieties were high in phosphorus use, all high phosphorus use were aluminum tolerant.
Interesting.
And so looking at that, and even in non-pH limiting environments, some were just better at accessing phosphorus in low phosphorus environments. So yeah, that off of what are we getting when we do things. I was not saying we shouldn't be breeding for aluminum tolerance.
But just we just have to be careful how we use it, not neglecting actually managing for it.
I really think it should be considered much more like a trait, such as Roundup Ready, and that we still have to find a way to lime. We still have to treat that soil and bring that pH up to more neutral, understanding that the process in some ground is less than economically viable. But we've also done the economics to show that banding phosphorus is more expensive than liming with current fertilizer prices.
So I have a question, and I've asked every wheat specialist, and I get the same answer every time. This goes back all the way to Jeff Edwards. Every year I ask, what was the standout wheat crop of the state? And it's always, it always comes back to the standard extension answer, well, it depends. So I'll just ask you, knowing that I'm probably going to get that answer, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask anyway. What was the standout wheat variety across the state of Oklahoma in 2024?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot. Honestly, I still need to look at the data.
That answer too. So
no, but
no, yeah.
But there is one variety. I don't even need to say. People will see it.
Right.
On the data, there is one variety that is very consistent across different sites. I'm not gonna say it. People have to go look it.
I love it.
OSUwheat.com.
Oh, well done. Nice. Well done.
Yeah, no, yes, because, I can say it and people will sometimes ask me for names of varieties. Some some varieties that will do better in some cases will not do as well in other situations. Right. So that's why I don't like to recommend names.
Right.
So they need to look at this data to make their own decision. And I'm really happy to provide this data, to do all this work and provide this data. But
I don't like to recommend names, but I do like to recommend websites.
So they can come and look at the data. And yes, there is one that they will see. It was consistently a very good yielding variety in different environments.
Well, and one thing Brett talked about was the fact that this year for him was the golden year for him for different areas that he's working into. Did you see that kind of for wheat varieties as a whole across the state?
Yes, like especially for disease.
Yeah.
So of course managing for it is not good, right? We have to spend money either with fungicide, or we should have paid attention on our variety selection early in the season.
Right.
But it's good for us as scientists to gather data.
Yeah.
And so that's why for bread is really important for developing varieties that are resistant. And I was just looking at the data earlier for comparing our intensive and standard management, and we had like some varieties that gained, I think was almost 40 bushels. And I will say it's with the fungicide of that intensive management system is due to the fungicide. We collected a lot of disease ratings this year in our trials. Everywhere we saw, we had some disease pressure just to provide that information for farmers too. But the fungicide this year was really had a really big effect.
In our taps, Amanda, you'll get the data later, are with and without fungicide. It's about a 10 to 12 bushel on a 60 bushel crop on the top end. We'll bring Amanda back on when we get all the data in. That's going to be a fun conversation and maybe one of the competitors. But
and we'll present that at the Oklahoma Wheat Growers. So the results and the winners and all that.
So they don't have to go to the website. They get to actually see it on the screen.
They can come and join us.
Yeah, come and join us.
August 13th. Or listen to us here.
There you go. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Amanda Silva, for going on with us. And it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I now know what I'm going to be. Well, I have to go to the website to go get that information and then link it to our website, reddirtagronomy.com. See what I did there? Anyway, but seriously, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com. or send us a tweet. Our handle is reddirtag. We would like to thank Dr. Amanda Silva for joining us on this podcast. And if you get a chance, head over to our website, reddirtagronomy.com, to find out more information about our guests and any of the resources that we talked about on today's podcast. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Arnall, I am Dave Deacon, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Agnow Media, LLC, 2024. And yes, all rights are reserved.